Good morning. Welcome to the live stream. Today is Thursday, April 9th. How's it going? My name is Angela, and this is day 9 of the 30 days of vanilla JavaScript. This is my attempt to just get better at JavaScript. I've been a front-end developer for almost 13 years. I'm very UI focused, but I have done a lot of full stack type work like custom CMS work, a lot of WordPress. I started my career on WordPress. The one area of front-end development that I've struggled the most with is JavaScript. This is my attempt to get better, and boy, oh boy, day 9 and like things are clicking, things are falling into place. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about what we got going on today. So would you do me a favor also? Let's just get this out of the way. Once I started actually asking people to do this, it made a huge difference with the channel actually growing. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, would you be so kind as to like this video? It helps the algorithm, helps get this content pushed out to more people who might be interested in front-end development. Subscribe if you're not already. I'm normally here 4 days a week, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, but of course every day during the month of April. So there's that. Let's say hello to the chat. Oz Loy is here. Good morning. Welcome. Happy to have you. Monique Robinson is also here. Monique is a mod in the chat. So is Malik. Go Elmo is Malik Robinson. Not related, just a coincidence. Both mods in the chat, we love them. Good morning. Hello, hola. Happy to have you all. So what are we working on today? We are working on form validation states. And this is one of the things that's really starting to click. And we talked about this at the end of yesterday's stream. Yesterday was the theme toggle and caching data. And let me just share this in the chat. Let me share this in the chat. Everything is also linked down in the description. And at the, just as a reminder, at the end of every day, we deploy the code, the HTML and the JavaScript, everything, the repository is linked down in the description. So if you have questions about, I don't know, anything, the CSS, whatever, it's all there. It's all open source. Have at it. Okay, so here's one of the things that really started to click with me about form validation states. And I had a little offline conversation with ChatGPT this morning. We don't need to go into too much detail about that. However, here's what I think I understand about forms and form validation. It's not about security. It's about providing a good user experience. Security happens server side. Doesn't happen client side. We are in the browser, that is client side. Everything in the browser can be manipulated. So a required attribute, a pattern attribute, a min length, a max length, all of those things can be manipulated. And if you think that you are going to strengthen those things using JavaScript, that can be manipulated too, because somebody will just turn it off. They'll just turn your JavaScript off, and they'll steal your endpoint, and they'll do whatever they want. So honeypots, that stuff is, it's not a bad thing to have a honeypot. I always include a honeypot, but don't treat your form validation like it's some big security measure for your form, because everything in the browser can be manipulated, every single thing. So this is about a user experience, not about providing security. Security happens server side. So what do I use server side? I use FormSpree. I don't even pay for it. I'm on the free version of FormSpree. Okay, I can't sign in. I'm not going to sign in right now. They really won't let you look at the plans if you're not signed in. Okay, that's what I thought. So I have the free forever, 50 submissions a month. I don't even get 50 submissions in a year. So I think FormSpree is great. They do a great job handling spam. I don't know, I just really like them. So every time we do a form on this channel and I need an endpoint, I'm always going to use FormSpree. So I highly recommend. And please, by all means, if you think that there's something I'm getting wrong about form validation states, let me know. I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't think I'm getting it wrong. And I think that I've always associated form validation with security, and that has made forms for me really intimidating because I don't like dealing with security. I mean, I want things to be secure, certainly, but it stresses me out to think that I'm in charge of security. That just really stresses me out and gives me anxiety. So now I think I finally have a better handle on it. I'm thinking about it the correct way, which is that it's about user experience. It's not necessarily about security. So, and Malik says, we are siblings in spirit. I think he's talking about Monique. Yes. And Osley says, where does the list of practice problems come from? Did you make it? I did. So I created this list of practice problems with ChatGPT. So I told ChatGPT what I wanted to do, what this idea of mine was, and ChatGPT initially came up with this list. I also had things that I wanted to do. Some of it was stuff that I had done in the past that I wanted to go back and revisit and redo. Some things I just didn't want to do, and some things I thought could be combined. So I spent a good couple of days, maybe 2-3 days with ChatGPT, just going back and forth, developing this list. What ChatGPT did, and what I really appreciate, is it started very simply. So we started with a button counter, a character count, and already these things are starting to build on each other. So this is an excellent use of ChatGPT, in my opinion. Ask it for 10 practice problems. Explain to ChatGPT what your level of knowledge is. So just tell ChatGPT, like, I understand this, I don't understand this. I want to do 10 practice problems in 10 days. What do you think? I was also really explicit about the fact that I didn't want solutions, but I wanted to be able to read documentation, and I wanted to be pointed in the right direction. And that was invaluable, because if it had been left up to me, we'd still be here probably working on the button counter. So I'm just saying, it's a good use of ChatGPT. And yeah, some of these things are definitely my idea. So the social sharing buttons, that's my idea. The GDPR cookie banner, that's my idea. I did that a couple years ago, and I've been wanting to redo that. Sortable table, that was a ChatGPT idea, but I really wanted to do that too. Transforming API data, that was also my idea, because as front-end developers, you will spend a lot of time massaging API data, a lot. URL query params, that was a ChatGPT idea, but I'm glad that we're doing that, because I've also done a lot of that in the past. And I also wanted to do intersection observer. Intersection observer is great for triggering things on scroll, like adding classes on scroll for animations. I've done that in the past too. So a lot of these, I would say a good healthy handful of these things were my idea. And then of course, keeping it very UI focused, because I'm not an object-oriented programmer. I'm just not. My brain doesn't work like that. So I needed it to be very UI focused, if that makes sense. I think it does. Okay. Yeah, I have also found LLMs work better when I say my goal is to diagnose and to not make the symptom go away. Totally. Yeah, I don't want ChatGPT to just give me code. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I need ChatGPT to give me code. Most of the time, it's such a good teaching tool. It does a really good job explaining things when I'm reading documentation and I can't get what I need from the documentation, or if I'm trying to decide between two methods and I don't understand what really the nuance in the methods, I can ask ChatGPT to explain it to me, and that's really helpful. So yeah. Oh, and then one final thing. I have a hard stop today at 12:30 my time. So that's in 1 hour and 50 minutes. So whatever we don't finish today, we will finish tomorrow morning. Tomorrow we're also going to do the simple task list. So whatever we don't get done today, we will do tomorrow. That might include deployment, and that is perfectly fine. So, because I also think, like, if you had asked me 10 days ago how to do a simple task list, I wouldn't have known what to do. And I think now I do know what to do. So, okay, let's get started. And I also don't think that we're going to be dealing with any CSS today. I just don't think we're going to need it. Okay, so there is a submit event right here. There is prevent default. Value. We know value because we know how to clear a value, like we had the reset button. So we can get a value, we can count the length of a value, and we know how to clear the value from an input. Focus. We know how to deal with focus. And then this, we're not going to do this, but I kept the link in. So regular expressions. The regular expressions I know is for email format check. We are not going to do this. I have experience with this. At my old job, the CRM team came to me and said, hey, can we put in like a pattern for like making sure that people are filling in their emails correctly? So I tried it. I tried a million different methods to do it. There's tons of tutorials out there on how to do it. And there would always be somebody or a group of people where the forms didn't work. And there was a comment at the end of yesterday's stream. Somebody said something to the effect of, it's wild what a valid email looks like. And I don't think that you can really develop a pattern to make sure that every single type of email address out there is going to be valid. What's going to happen, especially if you're not thoroughly testing your work, is that the form is just going to fail for a percentage of your people. And if you have dozens of forms and you are really relying on your forms for lead generation, which everybody is, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. I think you are better off having people incorrectly fill out their own email address than having some sort of pattern that is going to make the entire form fail for a percentage of your users. So I am not going to implement a pattern for emails. I just won't do it. We're going to check and make sure that it's filled in, that it's required, but I don't do pattern matching. If you think that's wrong, if you have a different experience, please let me know. That's my experience. And moving forward, if somebody asks me to implement a pattern, I just won't do it. Email can't be correctly identified by regex. It just can't. So I've tried it. It's a bad idea. So I'm going to leave. Honestly, I should probably just take those things out. When we do the deployment, I'm going to take those things out because, it's just a terrible idea. Don't do it. Okay, so the submit event, let's just look at the submit event. Oh, and the other thing that we're going to do is we are going to set up an endpoint so we can actually test this. So we'll do that. We'll probably end up doing that tomorrow. We'll see how far we get today. Okay. The submit event fires when a form is submitted. Note that the submit event... Caffeine Cowboy says, the few times I've had to do it, I just throw an alert with their input and ask one final time. Like, are you talking about a pattern, or are you just asking people to verify their email address for a second time? I think you're saying the latter. The few times I've had to do it, I just throw an alert with their input and ask one final time. Clarify for me, Caffeine Cowboy. Are you saying that you ask them to verify with a pattern attribute, or just asking them to verify twice? I would like clarification on that. Okay. Note that the submit event fires on the form element itself and not on any button or input type submit. Okay, that's good to know. However, the submit event, which is sent to indicate the form's submit action, has been triggered includes a submitter property. Let me read that again. Verify. So are you saying just to verify, not a pattern attribute? I think you're saying just to verify. Yeah, that's fair. That's not a bad idea, actually. So how do you make sure that they're filling in both fields? So then are you putting in logic to make sure that both fields match if they're verifying it for the second time? Okay, however, the submit event, which is sent to indicate the form's submit action has been triggered, includes a submitter property. Okay. And Caffeine Cowboy says, yeah, a summary of the important info. Okay. Okay, that's good information. Okay. So basically, the submit event fires when the user clicks a submit button, the user presses enter, a script calls the form request submit method. So I feel like we're just doing add event listener on the form, and then we're checking to make sure that the fields are filled in correctly, and as long as they are, form submitted. A yes no pop-up with their input. Oh, okay. A yes no pop-up with their input. Yes, and the form completes. No, focus put back to the input in question. Okay. So you're asking them to verify everything. And if it's a no, how do you know what to put focus on? Are you automatically putting focus on something? How do you know what's wrong? Like, say they filled in their email wrong, but they just misspelled their name. How do you know that that's the input that gets focus? I'm just curious. Okay. Usually stick to just email. So you're making the assumption, okay, so you're just putting focus back to the email address, but they could change anything they want. Got it. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to wrap my head around basic form validation first. Also, I do have some code that I use for form razzmatazz. Let me show it to you because we're going to use a little bit of what I like to do as well. Let me find it. Where are you? Right here. And Roha Chan is here. Good morning. Welcome. Okay. Wait a second. Why does it look like this? Let's look at a different one. It's because I was playing with minification. Nano Akia is also here. Good morning. Welcome. Or good evening in your case. Here. Okay. So here's what I like to do for forms. Let's see if we can also use some of this. Oh yeah, right here. I also really like to get this. I also really like to get, because I would run into this a lot, where um, we had many pages. We had dozens of pages with um, lead generation forms for like campaigns, right? Ad campaigns. And the number one problem that we had was what form came from what page. And the easiest way to solve that problem is the URL of the page. So what I also really like to do is I like to get the URL of the page and send it along in a hidden field. I think that that's a really good idea, especially if you have multiple pages on your site. And then if a spam bot or a bad actor or whomever gets a hold of your endpoint and that data doesn't come through, that's one way of knowing. Well, I mean, there'll probably be multiple ways of knowing that you're getting spam, but I think it's a good idea to include the URL of the page of the form. So just my personal opinion. So I want to get I want to do hidden fields for the URL and the path. So the event listener goes on the form, and then I'm a little unclear about prevent default. Oh, probably if it's false, we want to prevent the default, and we want to report the validity, and then we want to return. That makes sense. The other thing that I was doing was changing the button type, because I use a free version of FormSpree. It opens a success message in a new tab, but it doesn't clear the form itself. I wonder if we can clear the form ourselves. I think the answer is yes, we can definitely clear the form ourselves. We're changing the text of the button, so why can't we clear the form inputs? So I feel like the event listener here, we can check to make sure that the fields are filled in correctly, and then we can also clear the form, right? So we do have a little bit of starter code here, thanks to me sort of working on this myself a few months ago, but we can add more to this for sure. And Caffeine Cowboy says 5. Usually just stick to email 5. I'm not sure what the 5 represents. I'm so sorry. Osley says email can have nested parentheses, so it's in a class not recognizable by regex. Any regex only solution is necessarily wrong. Had to go look up the exact reason. So that's good to know. I didn't have an exact reason. I only had experience, which told me that anytime I tried to implement a regex pattern, the forms broke. And there were a large percentage of people contacting the university saying, we can't fill out your forms. So that's my experience. Okay, I am going to reference this. Let's go ahead and actually start with this. This is going to be our base. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable not reinventing the wheel every single time. So here's our form validation. And Roha Chan says, just curious, have you written Sass? I ask that because I find myself writing SCSS over CSS, but it's basically the same syntax, right? Just minor differences. Yes. So I've been a Sass user for over a decade. I switched to vanilla CSS from using Sass. This is a good question. I want to answer this question. I switched to vanilla CSS last summer after using Sass exclusively for 12 years. I was a big believer in Sass. I don't think Sass is bad, but I can only tell you that my CSS was not good. And I think that's because I learned Sass so early in my career. I like being able to organize and having partials. A dozen years ago, 10 years ago, we couldn't really do the types of variables in vanilla CSS now that we could with Sass back then, right? So the variables, the partials, mix-ins, includes obviously the nesting, that was all great. But I can only speak for myself and say that my specificity, inheritance, my lack of understanding of the user agent style sheet, all of those things were just non-existent. And I think that's because I learned Sass so early in my career. Certainly I knew vanilla JavaScript, or excuse me, vanilla CSS when I started, but everybody was using Sass back in 2011, 2012 when I first started learning. And I just immediately started learning it and using it. My nesting was out of control. My classes and my classes were wildly over specific. I was just having a lot of trouble writing good, efficient CSS. And when I switched to vanilla CSS, I got much better. I was finally really getting a handle on my specificity and inheritance, and and then as a result, I started to really understand what the user agent style sheet was. So SCSS is pronounced Sass. I would not have guessed that. It's not. So Sass and SCSS, I use those terms interchangeably. I feel like Sass was the original and SCSS is sort of the, version 2 or the precursor. I call it Sass. Yeah, so there are two different syntaxes for the same CSS preprocessor. Sass, syntactically awesome style sheets. They both offer the same powerful features like variables, nesting, and mix-ins, but they look and feel different to write. And I do use the SCSS. So I call them the same thing. To me, they're almost the same. So Sass is SCSS with semicolons. SCSS was made for people who like to use semis. So Sass is the TypeScript of CSS. Interesting. I hadn't referred to it. I hadn't thought of it like that. So yeah. So I call it Sass, even though it's SCSS. And I used it for over a decade. There's nothing wrong with it. I think its biggest, most powerful benefit, in my opinion, is being able to have partials that you can import and compile into one file. That's, I think, its main benefit. But that's coming from a person who just really enjoys vanilla. So, yeah. No one is here. Hello, how are you? No one is also a mod in the chat. Glad you could join us. So, yeah. Thank you for getting into that. Oh, thank you. You like my insights. Yeah. I'm always good for a good tangent. So, okay. Let's get started. So we're starting with the base, and I'm totally good with that. So we're going to do init function init form validation. And I know that there's lots of ways to validate a form, lots of methods, lots of techniques that people like to use. I'm just going with the basics, because what do we have here? We have a name, an email address, a text area, and a button. So like I said, I'm just going with the basics. There's more that we could do. There's always more that you can do, right? I'm sure that I will expand on this at some point. So here's our form. I do, okay, so here's a form. This markup is not what I would have chosen. Divs around everything. Okay, so it's putting in these error messages for us. It left out the required attributes. So I feel like I'm going to put required in to the markup because I feel like we know how to deal with, we know how to set an attribute, and I think that it's okay to just put it into the markup. So that's what we're going to do. So required, and I think that we should just make everything required. And then we'll deal with that validation. And here's our button. Here's our success message. Okay. And then I'm also going to put in I mean, do we want to mess around with a honeypot? Did we add one to this? Let me see. So here's the bot trap. This is what I have in this project. Immediately before the button. ChatGPT basically said, don't even bother putting in logic in your JavaScript to deal with the honeypot, because bots and bad actors know how to get around it, and any kind of logic that goes into your JavaScript is only would only maybe prevent the lowest level, most unsophisticated bot from submitting the form. Just said it was basically pointless. So, but we'll go ahead and keep it, right? And so aria hidden true. I think we also want to make sure don't we also want to have something in here so we can tell a screen reader not to fill this out? I feel like I've done that before too. Where did I put that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right here. A label. We need a label. So and we don't need a 4 because I'm just going to put the label right around it. But we're going to say leave this field empty. And that's for screen readers. So this is going to be our bot / honey trap. Aria hidden true. Okay, can you put an aria label though on a div that doesn't have a role? I don't think you can put an aria label on a div without a role. Aria label. Oh, stop. This again. Aria label on div without role. Using ARIA label on a div without a specific ARIA role is generally considered an accessibility anti-pattern because a div is a generic container with no inherent semantic meaning. Assign a role. So the role would just be region. Assign a role. If the div represents a specific UI component, give it a role that supports an accessible name, such as role region, role navigation, or role button. Use visually hidden text instead of an ARIA attribute. Place a span inside the div with a CSS class that hides it. Okay, well, let's just do that. Well, the label says leave this field empty, but ARIA hidden isn't going to do anything. Okay, so this is a good question. If this field is just to capture the URL of the page, is there a reason to include it in the HTML at all? You have to have, well, I haven't put it in yet, but yes, you have to have a hidden field so you can send that data with the form data. But this is just, unless you're asking about this, this is a honeypot. So if a bot fills this out, then we know that the submission is from a bot. That, I think that's the I think that's the point of a honeypot, is that if it gets filled out, it means a bot filled it out and not a person because it's hidden. Okay. ARIA hidden equals true on div. Oh, okay. Using ARIA hidden true on a div without a specific ARIA role is completely valid and commonly used to hide non-essential or decorative content from assistive technologies. Thank you. I did not know that. I thought any ARIA label on a div would not work. A div has no inherent semantic meaning. Its default role is generic. So adding ARIA hidden true simply removes the div and all its children from the accessibility tree without needing to define a role first. I did not know that. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that. Excellent. And Nano Kia says, I would assign a cheese and ham roll. We love cheese and ham. That's cute. Okay, so this works. I'm not going to do a style. We're going to do a class because we have a screen reader only class that will take care of that. We have a label that will tell a screen reader, leave this field empty. So if for some reason the screen reader comes upon, although ARIA hidden would remove it from the accessibility tree. So that's why we don't need it. Okay. Angela, sometimes I just need to go through this process. Caffeine Cowboy says, can't that data be added in the JavaScript alone? Not sure how external form services work and what can and can't be done. Yeah, I think that you could use JavaScript to create the element. You have to have a hidden field with a name, an API value to match up on the other end. So you could create the hidden fields yourself with JavaScript, but you still have to have an input with a name, and then that name is how it gets processed on the other end and logged as part of the data that goes through. So you do have to have the hidden field in order to send that form data through. So, okay, so real quick, just going back to the honeypot, I'm going to put a comment here. ARIA hidden equals true is valid on a div. Okay. We're going to put that note in. So here's our honeypot. So if this gets filled out, and this gets sent over to FormSpree, then we know a bot got their hands on this. ARIA hidden hides it from a screen reader. Okay. So we need an input with a type text. No, a type, hang on, type hidden. Name is, let me see here. What did I name it? I didn't put in hidden fields. Type hidden name, page path, name, page URL. So I'm going to do both. Whoops. So they have to have an API name. And yeah, you could create these. Page path, page URL. Oh, and they have to have a value. I have access to the form, so I am going to put them in. Because I think if you have access, why create it with JavaScript when you have access to the form? If you don't have access to the form, then by all means go ahead and use Java, create the elements for sure. So we want to capture the page URL. This method just worked really, really well when we had dozens and dozens of pages and we weren't capturing the title of the page. Once we refined our process with Salesforce, we didn't rely so much on the URL. However, before we refined our process with Salesforce, the number one complaint that I had was I have all these leads, but I don't know which page the lead came from. So once I put in hidden fields and I was able to grab the URL of the page, then the marketing director knew which leads came from which page. So things were messy for a while in our pre-Salesforce days over at St. Thomas. Actual fields. Okay. And then we have our bot right here, actual fields. And then I think it's worth saying that all are required. All are required. Okay. Yeah, this could probably work too. You could also try a hidden field that gets the current time and test it against the current time when submitted. If it's less than, say, 10 seconds, that's too fast, must be a bot. I mean, that would be worth trying too. So I think there are lots of good methods for testing for bots. I think, though, that my takeaway is that anybody can grab, and let's make sure that we get our, we should have a method, which would be what? Post. And our endpoint would be, well, our endpoint is going to be whatever we get from FormSpree once we get to that point. And then we would want to open this in a new window. So we'll just do target blank. Yeah. What was I going to say? All are required. Okay. So let's start with the things that are visible. Let's get this in. Pull this back up. And I'm also going to add a class of form. Okay. And and form can be our root element. And then we'll check to see if it's here. If it's not, just stop. And now we have everything scoped to the root. Okay. So we'll define the path. And it's actually a input with a name of page path. Whoop. And then we'll get the URL. The input attribute name page URL. I thought adding the hidden field dynamically might help with bot submissions. If JavaScript is disabled, the form can't submit and the URL capture is JavaScript only. Maybe I'm over engineering. So you and I are thinking along the same lines. And I did have this conversation with ChatGPT this morning. Should I just share this conversation? Oh, fire trucks. I can't with the fire trucks someday. I know, it's an emergency. Somebody needs help. I get it. Let's see here. I'll share this conversation with you. I'll share this because it really changed. It changed how I think about things. And so you tell me what you think of this. Here's what I asked. I said, okay, I need to talk this through. Just confirm or deny. Please don't give me code. I want feedback, but I think I'm finally understanding something related to keeping forms secure. So here was my question. And this is true. Someone in my chat said that the required HTML fields were easy to bypass. And it finally occurred to me that those attributes could just be removed all of the dev tools. I've actually done this to bypass something on a checkout form before, which this is a true story. About 2 years ago, I didn't want to answer a question, so I went in the dev tools and I removed the required attribute and submitted the form. I promise I wasn't trying to hack anyone. I just didn't want to answer the question. So using JavaScript to check form fields makes total sense, and I know how to do that. But what stops a bad guy from disabling JavaScript, then removing the required attributes, then filling out the form? Because it's not the absence of the hidden fields that stops the form from being submitted. That's not even really the point, right? I said maybe JavaScript is required to create the submit button and fill in the endpoint. Am I thinking about this the right way? So my thinking was use JavaScript to create the submit button, because if the submit button doesn't exist, then you can't submit the form. That's what I was thinking. And then I thought, we'll use JavaScript to use set attribute to add the endpoint, the method URL, right? So here was the response. You tell me what you think. What you're understanding correctly. You are absolutely right that HTML attributes like required, min length, pattern, and input type are client-side convenience features. JavaScript validation is also client-side. Anything client-side can be bypassed. So yes, a person can remove required in DevTools, disable JavaScript, submit directly to the endpoint without using your form at all. I think this is the most important thing right here. Submit directly to the endpoint without using your form at all. Whether the hidden fields exist or not is not the point. The hidden fields capture the data that I need to close the loop on my lead. That's what those do. It's not about the fact that the hidden fields don't exist, so somehow my form is more secure or can't be submitted. That's not the point at all, because anybody can take my endpoint and do whatever they want with it. They can turn off JavaScript. They can still use my endpoint to do bot submissions. So it doesn't matter what conditions I build into the form or into the JavaScript. It just doesn't matter. This is my opinion. This is what I think. Fake requests with curl, Postman scripts, bots, etc. That part is all true. The key distinction: client-side validation exists mostly for user experience, quick feedback, reducing accidental bad input. It does not provide real security by itself. Real security comes from server-side validation. That means the server must still check: is the field present? Is the format valid? Is the length acceptable? Is the value allowed? Is the request suspicious or abusive? If the server accepts bad input just because the browser sent it, that is the real problem. So, is JavaScript creating the submit button or endpoint the answer? Not really. That can raise the bar a tiny bit, but it does not secure the form in any meaningful way. A bad actor can still inspect the network request or reverse engineer what the page is doing. If the form can be submitted by a normal browser, it can usually be replicated. So your instinct is good, but the stronger mental model is never trust the browser, trust only what the server validates. The practical way to think about it: HTML validation helps honest users. JavaScript validation helps honest users more smoothly. Server-side validation protects the application. That's the stack. One more important point: there is also a difference between validation, security, spam protection, and abuse prevention. Even if the server validates fields correctly, you may still need protection against spam bots, rate abuse, or automated submissions. That is a separate layer from, is this field required? Bottom line: confirm. Yes, client-side checks are easy to bypass. Deny. No, hiding submit behavior in JavaScript is not the real security model. Confirm. The real protection is that the back end or form processor must validate everything again. So you're thinking about it the right way. Now, the breakthrough is realizing the browser is not a trusted environment. So this just sort of changed everything about how I'm thinking about form validation. It's about the user experience. It's not about trying to prevent spam. You can put honeypots in, and I will still do that, and I will still continue to capture the data that I want to capture. If I have access to the markup, I will always default to putting my markup in the markup. We've done a lot of create elements here for the sake of learning how to create elements, not because it's better than putting the markup directly in the markup. So I want to be clear about what I think is the right way to do things. And that's, we have access to markup, it goes in the markup. And that's not, I don't think that's right or wrong. I do think it's a best practice. So that's what I'm going to do moving forward. So I hope that that all makes sense. I hope that all makes sense. Let's see here. I love these conversations though, because forms and form validation has always been incredibly scary to me, because I always thought it was about security. And this has demystified a lot of that and made it so much less intimidating. That is not my job as a front-end developer to do all of the security. That's the server's job. That is not my job. My job is to provide a good user experience and to adhere to best practices. So that's what I'm going to do. Dante is here. Behold, I have arrived. The cops are on to me. I actually, I live near a firehouse. So I think that was a fire truck, or it could have been an ambulance. Yeah. So, so it sounds like whatever security features we'd want are really only available on the back end where bots can't mess with stuff. I think so. That's what I think. And that's so and this is another reason why I don't like dealing with email servers. I really can't stand dealing with email servers. It's hard to get things to submit. So I am such a big fan of FormSpree. I also really like Mailgun. Check out Mailgun sometime. They're amazing, especially if you're on WordPress. A lot of shared hosting because WordPress sends a lot of email. Like if there's a new user sign up, if there's a password change, I don't know, WordPress just sends a lot of email, and shared hosting, like especially GoDaddy, it is notoriously difficult to get WordPress working on shared hosting. It's notoriously difficult to get WordPress email working in any environment. Once I learned about Mailgun and Mailgun having a WordPress plugin, Mailgun does all of the back end work. I don't have to deal with any of that on my server anymore because Mailgun will do all of that work for me. I don't use Mailgun like for the static sites. I like using FormSpree, but things like Mailgun, things like FormSpree are often free or very low cost, and they take care of all the back end security for you. So you can just deal with like the front end accessibility, maybe put in a little honeypot, capture your hidden fields, get your API data in there, and just make it the best user experience possible. So this is where I'm firmly landing on this topic, and I'm glad that I finally have some understanding now. I think Monique agrees. Good. I'm glad we all agree. Do what you can, but be realistic with expectations. Yeah. And Malik is off to his meeting. So where are we at on time here? I think we have about an hour left. Yep, we have an hour left. Okay. Good conversation. Good conversation. Okay, let's get back to this. All right. So here's our hidden fields. And yes, but we have to define all of these. So const, get the name. Name equals name. Whoops. Input. Get the email. What I'd really like to do is on form submission clear those fields ourselves. That's what I would really like to do. So that's what I'm looking forward to here. Root. Okay, so we've got name, we've got email, and we'll get the text area too. Whoops. Name equals message field. Okay, and then I think we just need our button, our submit, and that's just our button. Well, we should probably put in type equals submit, right? Button type equals submit. Okay, so we've got our path, our URL, name, email, text area, submit. Do we need to... We probably need to get each... Well, we have defining a lot of stuff today, huh? Okay, we probably need to get our name error, email error, message error. Okay. Name error. And this is name error. And name error, email error, message error. Okay, do we finally have everything here? I think we do. Nope, success message. Form success. Is this back in the ES5 days? I remember the convention where variables for query selector had to be named email L, I suppose as an element, or email $sign. Was that for jQuery? To show that they were DOM elements. I remember $sign back in the jQuery days. So, okay, I think we have everything. Okay. Next, we're checking for form. I guess the first two things that I'm going to do is we'll just go ahead and do these right out of the gate. So if URL, or rather if path, page URL, hang on. If path, then I want the path value to equal the window location path name. And then we'll do the same thing here. So if there's a URL, then we want the URL value to equal the window location href. Oh, hang on. Angela. URL value, if URL, don't need an equals. Okay, so if the path exists, we want the path value to equal the window location path name. If URL, we want the URL value to equal the window location href. So that should fill in those two hidden fields. So we'll do get hidden field values. Excellent. Okay. Now we'll do our event listener. So form, add event listener, submit, and we need that event. And we're going to check for form check validity. And I think that that is an API method that just returns true or false, but I don't remember. Let's check it here. Check validity right here. The check validity method of the HTML select element interface returns a Boolean value, which indicates if the element meets any constraint validation rules applied to it. So are we supposed to do our own rules though? Is that the point of this? So I feel like the first thing that we need to do, so these are our fields. Fields, the user fills out. This is the submit button. And then these are the, what did we call it? Inline errors right here. Well, we'll call these the inline, well, I guess they're errors, right? So these are the inline errors or success. Okay, so I think the point of this, because it didn't tell us about check validity. So I feel like the point of this is to, if they said to do an MDN prep of value, we're just supposed to check and see if the value exists, right? Because what's validity doing? Validity is just checking to see if the field is filled out. What constitutes validity? Okay, so an HTML select element with a non-null validation message is considered invalid. Will match, okay. I'm just going to check and see if there's a value, but you could definitely use that. So what are we checking for? Name, email, or text. So can I just do this? If name or email or text area, if the name, the email, or text area, or do I have to do one at a time? Maybe it's better to do one at a time, because if it meets the first condition, it's going to stop, right? Or I could do and. Well, let's do one at a time, because you would want to show the inline message, right? So if name, if the name value is empty, then name error remove attribute, remove attribute hidden. So that would show the error message, right? Just checking for null or empty. I'm checking for empty if it's not filled in, right? So what's the difference between an empty string and null? So input empty string versus null. Okay. In programming and data management, the difference between an empty string and null centers on whether a value is known but empty or completely absent. The empty string. This is a known defined value. It is an actual object in memory, a string that just happens to have 0 characters. Null. This represents the total absence of a value or a non-existent reference. It tells the system no data has been assigned or that the value is missing. Okay. Caffeine Cowboy for the win. Let's get back here. Okay. So I will use Angela, wrong way. I will use null. Null. And Osley says the HTML and JavaScript that gets sent to the user's browser is a set of requests that the user can decide to ignore. Security has to be done on a computer you own, like the server. That's a good explanation. Good. Thank you for that. I'm glad we're all in agreement. I had this weird fear that I was going to have to convince people of my belief after my conversation with ChatGPT. So, okay. So there's no action. So can I test this by just hitting? Okay, it wants to. Let me take out the well, can we at least see what's happening in, well, but we know it's not taking that out, right? So this is probably where we want to do prevent default, right? Just for testing. Maybe equals null or equals an empty string. I think these have to be two separate things. Fine. So if the value is null or the value is an empty string. Okay, fair enough. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out that. So we're not automatically. We'll put this back in later. Oh, and this says no validate. I just want to see if I can get my form to... Okay. How do I test this? Do I have to take, maybe I have to take these out. How do I test? I don't know. Well, this is fun so far, huh? Root is, oh, hang on. So we're just having a problem up here. Okay, root is not. Oh, right here. There we go. Root form is not defined. Hang on. Do I have this filled out correctly? Form validation, yeah. Line 24. Oh. Finally. Okay, so that worked. That worked. What don't you like? An element doesn't have an auto. Oh my God, with the autocomplete attributes. Okay. Well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. We'll get that filled in later. Okay, so we finally have a way to test. We finally have a way to test. Good. So we can do this. I'm just going to keep going with this. I think we want to do all of these separate. I think they need to be separate. They need to be their own thing. That's what I think. Oh, hang on, I got these wrong. This is message error. We've got name error, email error, message error, and I got this wrong. Okay. That's working now. That's kind of cool. Okay, what else do we want to do? Okay, things are finally starting to work. So we're checking to see if there is a null value or an empty string. Okay, next. And then maybe we do something like one at a time, because if we were just relying on the required attribute, it would do them one at a time. It wouldn't throw them all at the same time. So maybe we return after each one to get it to stop. So let's test that. So could you like for each through all of these things and do it that way? Just check for the value that way? Probably. Because what if you had a really, really long form? Is that more efficient to just like, what if we just looped through our inputs? You would still have to do the text area separately, but that would be okay. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to make a note though. Could probably loop through the inputs too. So I'm just going to leave a little note there. Because what if you had a really, really long form? Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that for now. So let's see if we can do this. Yes. Now we're just doing one at a time. So I'll put in a name. Now what if I hit OK? So now I'll put in Heidi at jholden.com. Okay. So let's say someone fills in, then we would want to take this out, right? If the form hasn't been cleared and they got this inline message and they were like, oh, okay, I'll come back in and put that in. We would want that to clear as soon as they put that in, right? Because we wouldn't want them to think that this is still invalid just because a second invalid message came up. So can we deal with that? Can we deal with that? Else, if we're submitting again, we would want to set attribute. That's what I think. So let's try it. And Osley says, another way to think about it. Do you want random websites to visit to be able to make your browser do whatever they want and you can't refuse? No, I don't want that. So I think that's going back to an earlier point. The HTML and JavaScript that gets sent to the user's browser is a set of requests that the user can decide to ignore. Security has to be done on a computer you own. So computers and browsers also have to be secure, is I think your point. Caffeine Cowboy says, could do each check after the input loses focus. One function to check for null or empty with input name as parameter. Type too late. Looks like you got it working. Okay. Yes, we have focus also. So that's a good point. So, okay, let's try this again. So, Heidi. I totally get it now, why this is all about the user experience. And I'm here for it. Yes. Right there. Yes. Okay. So that means that we need to do this else also. So this might look a little verbose, but I can't make it simple or streamlined until I understand how to do it in the first place. So I like it though. I'm here for it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm just going to go through this form from top to bottom until I get the user experience that seems normal to me. So, seems like the good user experience. Okay. So now we're checking all of our fields to make sure that they're filled in. We're not worried about pattern matching. We're checking for either null or an empty string. Thank you, Caffeine Cowboy, for pointing that out. Yes. What else do we have here? Okay. We've got our return statements in, so we're only doing one at a time. And then I need more help figuring this out. So does this just mean this prevent default that we're not submitting? So does this really need to be, so if we're going to prevent default, does it need to be in each one? Because we're preventing the default behavior because there's an error, right? That's what I think. Okay, good. Thank you. I can't make it simpler or streamlined until I learn how to do it in the first place. Yes, I have to keep reminding myself of this. I get very insecure about the pressure to use, like, to keep everything on one line, to never put in comments. I can't even believe that that's a thing. The pressure to not put comments in my code, because the code itself should say exactly what's going on. I just can't tell you how absurd I think that that is. So I'll figure out how to do things more streamlined when I understand the behavior first. So make it work at all. Only after that, make it work well. Yeah, yes, just keep the submit button from submitting. So I'm going to do prevent default for each individual thing. I don't think it's supposed to be in the event listener, in the literally the root of the event listener. So, okay. So here are our individual fields being checked. I think in the future we could just loop through the inputs and do this, but we're going to do this for now. So, what's next? We can show the message error, we can remove the message error. The next thing I think I want to do is clear the fields, because the behavior of the form is that, and this is a form spree thing because I don't pay for form spree, it takes the user away from the site. So the way that I prevent that from happening is by putting in the target blank. So at least the success message from form spree opens in a new tab. The user can go back to the original tab, but the form fields are all still filled in. So let's just clear those fields. We'll just clear those fields. So I'm going to do, so here's what I was doing. Let me show you. Here's what I was doing. All I was doing was changing the text of the button from submit to sending. So if someone went back to that tab, they would see the fields all filled in, and they would see sending, and they would see the button was disabled, and they could just refresh the page and the fields would clear on their own. We don't need to do this if we can clear the fields ourselves, right? We don't have to do anything to the button. So let's do that. That makes so much more sense. And then form spree, I don't need you, form spree, to do that. Okay. So then when the form submits, which would just be in the root of the event listener, we would just say name, email, text area, value equals empty string, right? Null or empty string? I think empty string, which is exactly what we did back on our filter. Where we just said the input value equals an empty string. And then we would also want to remove the attribute hidden for form success. So the first thing that we'll do is name dot value equals empty string. Is it really going to be this easy? Value equals empty string. And then, what did I call it? Message, text area. Text area dot value equals empty string. And then we want our form success. We're going to say form success. No. Form success. Remove attribute hidden. Okay. So I'm thinking of all the possibilities of all the other things that we could do. I'm just focusing on the core basics. Heidi, Holden, Heidi at, and then we'll say form submission. Yay. So how are we going to capture this? Well, where are we at for time? Oh, we got time. We got a half an hour left. So let's pull up Form Spree and let's actually get this form wired up so we can test it. One moment. I'm going to log in and we're going to do it. Okay. 1 second. All right. So here's Form Spree. Going to add new form and we'll call this form validation states. Create our form. Here's our endpoint. That's all I want. This is what I love about Form Spree. I don't have to match up API names on their end. So this is a method post action, and then we take out the no validate, right? Let me Google that. Form element. Oh, stop. Why does my tab lose focus every time? Stop it. Why? Form element. No. I don't know what no validate. I mean, I have an idea of what no validate means, but explain it to me. Here. The no validate property interface is a Boolean value indicating if the form will bypass constraint validation when submitted. It reflects the form element's no validate attribute. If the attribute is present, the value is true. If this attribute is not set or the value is set to false, the form is validated. This can be overridden by setting the HTML element form no validate or HTML button element form no validate property to true. But what is the point? I don't know what the point of it is. Purpose. Developers often use no validate when they want to handle validation entirely via custom JavaScript or solely on the server side, preventing the browser's default error bubbles from appearing. Okay, Okay, so that would mean that we wouldn't use the required attributes. Bypassing validation is helpful for features like save as draft, where a user might want to save incomplete or currently invalid data to finish later. Overriding at the button level. You can override a form's validation settings for specific submission buttons using the form no validate attribute. This allows one button to validate and another to bypass. Okay, so that says to me that putting required was not, pun intended, required, because we're doing it ourselves. And no validate bypasses all of that anyways. Am I understanding that correctly? That's how I'm reading that. So we'll go ahead and put that back in. Got it. Okay, we're learning. I think that what I'm going to end up doing on this page is taking out the regex stuff and maybe putting in a few extra things for people to read about, like null versus an empty string or no validate. Okay, so we have our endpoint, we have our method. Let's go ahead and put in a target equals blank because we need a new page to open. We also need to, it's not going to work locally, so we have to deploy this. So let's go ahead and get this deployed. We can update our page with code and markup tomorrow. I don't really care about that. I just want to be able to test this. Yeah, so let's go ahead and I'm going to commit this, and we can just deploy it. It's a practice site, so it's fine. Form validation JS. Okay. And this is day 9. So we're going to do our components. And day 9, we have to remember to put our form on the UI components page. We'll worry about that later. We're testing. We're in testing mode right now. And honestly, we're kind of treating our production site like a staging site, and I'm fine with that because we're literally in the middle of a build, right? That's what this is. So let's go ahead and refresh. Let's make sure that everything is here. Did I deploy the components? Oh, hang on. We're on the wrong site. Man, I'm having a time. What is happening? Why am I always losing focus when I open a new tab? Okay. So we've got a response. Let's see what happens here. Well, first of all, we need to test every single one. Okay, please enter your name. All right. So far, so good. All right. Form submission on April 9th, 2026 at 12:12 p.m. Okay, so now we get our success page opened in a new tab from FormSpree. We have a success message and our form has been cleared. So now, without doing anything, refreshing the page or anything, can we click this button and get the same message, get the same error? Yes. Yes. 19, I have 19 minutes left on the hard stop. 19 minutes. Yes. We're good though. This is awesome. I am so pleased with this. Why did it never occur to me to clear the fields if I was changing the text in the buttons? Am I right? You know what else we could do? We could like print back their information to them. Or we could do a pop-up that says, is this correct? And like ask them to confirm. I mean, there's like 5 million things that we could do, but I'm telling you, this is perfect. This to me is perfect. I love it. I just totally love it. So, anyways. No, okay. I don't have ADHD. I'm talking about literally the address bar is losing focus up here. Or are you just being funny? I think you're just being funny. I think I'm accidentally bumping something on my keyboard. So, yeah, so here's why I use FileZilla. The reason I use FileZilla in my streams is, number one, these are static websites. They don't have a back end. So it's very easy to deploy static files, right? Number two, I've been using rsync for a really long time. I recently learned in the last few months that Windows machines by default don't have like a Linux terminal, a Linux command line. You guys can use it if you want to on Windows. So I started using FileZilla just because I wanted to be friendly to new developers. That's all I wanted to do. And it works. It gets the job done. It's very easy. I hadn't used FileZilla in a decade until probably a couple of months ago. And I was like, why did I stop using FileZilla? It's so stinking easy. I love it. So, oh, you were attempting to be funny. It was funny. So it was funny. Okay, yes. And we have a hard stop in about 15 minutes now. I am very happy with this. So I think we can get this deployed. I'm going to call this one done. So let's go ahead and deploy our code, and let's go ahead. We have to check FormSpree. Hang on. We'll check our form. Let's check and make sure if our submission went through. Right here. Here's our submission. Okay. We had some stuff not go through though. So interestingly, we got our page path and our page URL, no problem. Our email, our message field, and our name did not go through though. Why not? Why didn't those go through? Okay, hang on. Let's check and see if I did something wrong here. If I got my... Oh, hang on. Did I get these wrong? Did I get our API names wrong? Name. email and message field. Why didn't that data go through on submission? Oh, because I cleared the fields on submit. That's why. We cleared our fields too soon. Hang on. Okay, this is why we test. We cannot clear our fields on submit. We have to clear our fields after we submit. Oh, yeah. So do we clear our fields after the event listener? I think we do. Is that going to work? No, because outside of the event listener, it's just going to clear it on page load. So how do we do that? A set timeout? Do we do a set timeout? Do we let it submit first and then clear the fields? So do we... Okay, I have to think about this. I feel like a set timeout is the way to do it. Set timeout, maybe 5 seconds. We would want to do, we could do this immediately, form success. So the fields are being cleared on submit because they're inside the submit event listener. So would we do a set timeout? Would we like wait 5 seconds and then clear the fields? Make everything inside the submit its own function, followed by a clear fields function. Make everything inside the submit its own function, followed by a clear fields function. But aren't you still running the function inside the submit? Can't we just do this? I'm going to ask Google. How do I clear the... Okay, actually this might be better for ChatGPT since we already have this. Will a set timeout delay clearing the fields after I submit my form? Short answer, no, not reliably. In your current workflow, you only call prevent default when the validation fails. When validation passes, the form submits normally. That means the browser navigates away or reloads almost immediately. Your set timeout never gets a chance to run. So even though you scheduled a 5-second delay, the page is gone before that timer fires. When set timeout would work It works if you prevent the default submission, the page stays in place. In your current code, validation fails, submission blocked, timeout would run, but you don't reach it anyway because of return. Validation passes, submission happens, timeout gets cut off. The core rule. Anything after a successful native form submit is basically irrelevant unless you stop the submit. What you're really deciding. This isn't about set timeout, it's about intent. Do you want a real form submission, form spree handles it, or a controlled UX flow, show success, clear fields, then maybe submit. You typically don't get both without changing the submission model. Bottom line, your set timeout logic is fine, it just won't run because the page unloads. The deciding factor is whether you let the form submit normally or not. Yeah, I find the solutions that rhyme with just wait an amount of time and then do it end up causing headaches. Caffeine Cowboy says a validation method. Piece of state, validated equals true, submit and run, clear fields. If validation false, prevent default. Okay, so is there a way to check for validation or a submission, then clear the fields? Yes, but when you can clear them depends on who is in control of the submission. Two different cases. Native form submit. If the form submits normally to form spree, the browser leaves the page. That means you generally cannot depend on your own JavaScript after submit to clear fields because the page is unloading. In that case, clearing the fields is kind of pointless anyway because the user is no longer sitting on that exact page. Okay, ChatGPT doesn't know I'm opening a new browser tab, so I have to tell it that. If you prevent the native submit and handle the submission yourself, then yes, validate fields, send data, confirm success, clear the fields. That is the setup where validate, submit, then clear makes sense. The important distinction. You do not want to clear the fields just because validation passed before you know the submission actually succeeded, because valid and successfully sent are not the same thing. A form can be valid and still fail to submit. So the clean mental model is invalid form, keep values, show errors. Valid form, but submission fails. Keep values, show failure state. Valid form and submission succeeds, then clear values. That's the correct flow. With form spree specifically, if you are using their normal hosted form flow, they often handle the success step with a redirect or a success page, so you may not need to clear anything yourself. If you want the user to stay on the page, see a success message, and then have the form reset, that usually means a JavaScript controlled submission flow instead of a plain native submit. So yes, there is a way. The real question is, okay, I'm opening the form spree success in a new tab. I don't want my users to leave my site. So if the form spree success page opens in a new tab, then your original page stays loaded. So yes, in that setup, you can clear the fields on the original page. I think the submit and API call would have to happen in JavaScript rather than using post in HTML. If the current page stays open, your JavaScript can keep running. If the current page unloads, it cannot. So your idea is workable because your page is not leaving. The one thing to be careful about is timing and meaning. Validation passed does not necessarily mean submission succeeded. The form may have been allowed to submit, but that is still not the same as confirming success. So the cleanest way to think about your current setup is, if you only care about clearing the form after a valid submit attempt, then yes, you can do that on your page. If you care about clearing it only after a confirmed successful submission, and I think this is it right here, that is a different standard. For a simple project, clearing after the submit is triggered is reasonable, especially since the success response is opening elsewhere and the user is staying on your site. So yes, your current approach can work in principle because the original page remains loaded. The only nuance is whether you want to treat submit happened as good enough or whether you want true confirmation before clearing. I want true confirmation before clearing. Then you need the submission flow to give your page a real success signal. With your current setup, where the form submits to FormSpree in a new tab, your original page does not truly know whether the submission succeeded. It only knows that the browser attempted to submit the form. Yeah, what we're doing now isn't going to work. You need a flow where your page stays in control long enough to get the response back. Conceptually, that means your page submits the form. Your page receives success or failure. Only on success do you reset the fields. That is the clean version of what you want. I think the problem is we're not getting back the response, right? Because I don't even think doing it in JavaScript is going to matter. FormSpree isn't going to give us back the response because FormSpree, the free version, which is what I'm using, is always going to say, it's either going to open a new tab or take us away from the site. It's not going to give us back the response we want because the free version is not designed to give us back the response. That's what I think. Does FormSpree have an API to use? Yeah, if you pay for it. If you pay for it. But also, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I think that we need to work within the constraints of what FormSpree is doing for us. Yeah. An async function to wait for the response. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think also, so I think that it's beyond the scope of simple form validation too. I think I see the flaw in why it's not going to be possible to clear those inputs and why disabling the button is probably the better approach, right? Yeah, disabling the button is the better approach because we are not going to get a response back from FormSpree on the free version. That's just not how they do it. So, do they have an API? Monique is reminding me about the hard time. We have 1 minute. Let's check and see if they have an API. I think that they do. Let's see here. FormSpree API async. Here. You can use form spree Ajax to submit your form spree forms with plain JavaScript without writing your own fetch, Axios, or jQuery submission logic. Yeah, I don't really want to do this because I wanted the JavaScript, the vanilla JavaScript, to be a little more generic. So I think what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to go back to disabling the button. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to take this out and we're just going to go ahead and disable the button, which is what I did, in the first place. And maybe overnight tonight, I'll think of a couple other things that we could do with this for some sort of validation. So yeah, they do. They have an API. So I'm just on the free version, so I'm limited. I'm trying to get away with the free version of stuff. So, okay, I have to go get ready for my meeting. So we're gonna call it here for today. Tomorrow we are going to finish up the form stuff. We are also going to, let's close this. We're gonna finish up the form stuff, and we are also going to, where's our site? Hang on, where are you? We are going to work on the simple task list, which I feel pretty good about how to do this. If you had asked me 10 days ago, Angela, build a simple task list, I would not have known what to do, but I think I do know what to do now. So do me a favor. If you haven't yet, would you be so kind as to like the video, subscribe if you're not already. I would appreciate it so much. It helps the channel grow. It helps the algorithm. Just a reminder, I'm here every day in the month of April. We're working on daily JavaScript challenges in order to get better at JavaScript, or I am at least, with a lot of help from the chat. Thank you everybody who is here today to hang out with me. Come back tomorrow. We'll finish this up and we'll do our simple task list. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Bye-bye.